The Northern Health Science Alliance published a report earlier this year called Health for Wealth, and they set about estimating what the productivity prize would be for the North if we could sort our health challenges, and that's a little over 13 billion per annum. So what I'd like to do now is to move to talk to our panellists and get some of their views on the report, the key actions we can take together to create a net zero pathway in the coming years. So firstly, we've heard, as I said, from Piers and we've heard from Chris. What I'd like to do is to invite Karl, if he wants to make a few remarks before we get into a discussion. Karl Ennis, who's the incoming Chief Executive of Siemens UK and Ireland, to perhaps make some remarks, and then I'll introduce some other colleagues. Karl.
Thank you. Good morning. Hi, good morning everybody. So thank you for the opportunity and for the invitation. And as Roger has mentioned, yes, my name's Karl Ennis. I'm the head of one of the businesses within Siemens, but also about to be the new, as I've been discussing earlier on today, the new Jürgen. So many of you will know Jürgen Meyer, who is our CEO until the end of this month, and then I pick up the reins from the 1st of December. This is a passionate topic for me, not least because I'm an engineer at heart, a switchgear engineer, if anybody's interested, and so absolutely believe that the time is right now for a change in our energy environment. Siemens were well placed to support that. We are three basic streams of our business: industry and infrastructure, energy and healthcare. And we believe that we have a portfolio of products that can help contribute to the solution to these. I would say that's the sales pitch over. It is not a technology challenge, and my comments on the report would be, I think it's an excellent report. I would say two things about it as my opening comments. One is that I think we're going to have to change our mindset from centralised to decentralised, and that's perhaps something that is not fully understood, and the need, Roger talked about the integration of heat, energy and transport. That will become far more important, so that would be a topic, and the scale of the challenge is often misunderstood, and we've done some work with a number of LEPs up and down the country to help try and put it into real terms, just the scale of what we're going to have to do. And we estimate that to get to carbon neutral by carbon net zero by 2050, it's more than 100 billion euros worth of investment to get there. It's a massive task, and if we do not start now, we won't hit 2050. I'm up for the ambition. If we set our target of 2030 there, then that's great. But actually 2050 is tough. The last thing I would say is we talk a lot about Ds in the energy world: decarbonisation, decentralisation, democratisation is the latest D. There's another D we use which I think we need to now stop talking about, and that's demonstration. Right? This is not a technology play. We know we can do this. This is about scale, about doing things at scale, and as long as we continue to demonstrate and think that's a success, we will fail. Thank you.
The wonders of modern technology have allowed David Levine to send me a text to say that, uncharacteristically on my part, I said that we'd create 1,000 jobs. Actually, you'd create 100,000 jobs. I've never knowingly underestimated anything that could be potential, so forgive me. So, without further ado, I'm delighted that Brent Cheshire, who's the chair of the Mersey Tidal Commission, is also here with us. So, Brent, perhaps you'd like to add some remarks?
Some of you may remember me from my previous life, which was country chairman and chief exec of Dong Energy, now Ørsted, where we deployed, and I was fortunate enough to do it, a lot of the wind technology that's bought from Karl's outfit, most of it in the early days, that's made a huge difference to energy generation and is now seen as one of the great successes. What I'd like to remind you is that in 2010, so nine years ago, 11, we were making statements like, we will be at €100, 80 and 90 pounds a megawatt hour for projects committed in 2020. And I got vilified. I got destroyed by the power industry, not doable. Now it's a huge success story, and £46 a megawatt hour decisions will be made shortly. £57 a megawatt hour have already been made. So the thing is, the ambition and achievability can be done. That was pump primed by a very dedicated government. 2010, it was a coalition. So the combination of Ed Davey and Charles Hendry was fabulous. That's what made it happen. So that was clear. There was a clear strategy, but a lot of government didn't agree. And at the same time, CCUS, which comes out clearly in the report for this region, which is a massive thing to do, but is absolutely essential for the success of the North, had a £1 billion competition effectively pulled there or thereafter because it wasn't affordable. Fortunately, if that billion had been spent there, it probably wouldn't have gone into offshore wind, so you don't win them all. But we've lost 10 years of CCUS, we've lost that commitment, and as Karl said, it's not technology that's that difficult. It needs developed, it needs things running, because injecting offshore is not that trivial. I'm a geologist by background. Getting things into the ground is not going to be trivial. So what I would say about the report is I think it's excellent. I'm particularly pleased to see there's an emphasis on collaboration. Collaboration is key. The other thing I learned in my time here, which Chris will know about greatly, is trying to get different LEP areas to collaborate as we were trying to look for supply chain and wire people together was unbelievably difficult. It should be here. No, it should be here. We're better than them. No, we're better than them. And particularly north and south of the river here was quite an education for me. Interestingly enough, that's improved a lot, and we see things moving forward. So the collaboration is absolutely fundamental to delivery, and I'm delighted to see that's emphasised here. Also, I totally agree. I'm working now on Mersey Tidal, working for a devolved Metro Mayor, and he's the guy who said, we will do this. Your job, Brent, is to go and try and work out if it's going to work or not, but we will do this, and we will convince central government it makes sense. It doesn't make sense everywhere, but for Liverpool it makes absolute sense. Low cost, long life, 120 years, totally green energy, low tech, no real decommissioning issues. So why wouldn't you do it in Liverpool, where you've got all the high CO2 and you can use it to power CCUS, you could use it for green energy, you could use it to power the traditional economy. So these sorts of things, it's about getting the balance, but coordination is key, cooperation is key, and I think how you work as a northern powerhouse to make this happen is absolutely fundamental, and it can't be about us and not them. It's got to be collaborative. We've seen this. I've been involved, and I'm still involved with Durham University. I was involved with Hull University with Project Aura. What we've seen there is universities here are massively punching above their weight. They're actually excellent universities, but from Durham to Hull to Sheffield to Leeds, all cooperating together and winning competition after competition to get the funds. So the collaboration is key. And just my last point is 2032 is a hell of an ambition to make all of this work. 50% decarbonisation from where you are now by 2032. Boy, you're going to have to be good. CCUS is really going to have to work, but it can be done. The skills are here, the technologies are here. I'm not sure all the young people are being trained to deliver that, and that's something else that needs to be focused on. But I think this is an immensely good start.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brent. I think you're absolutely right, and we have to keep challenging ourselves that we get the balance of healthy competitions as between bits of the North and not all meaningful collaboration at all times, because For me, the solution is about recognising where there are the relative strengths and supporting roles, and that we play those as a community, and believe genuinely that we have a huge economic and social offer to make. And certainly, as long as I'm chair of the NP11, I will work with my LEP colleagues to make sure we do this at a northern level without spoiling the opportunities locally. So let's move to one of the authors of this report. Can I introduce Duncan McKee from KPMG Utilities and invite him to add some further remarks or even particular points he wants to bring out of the report before we go into a discussion session. And I'm also going to try and carve out a bit of time, because I'm conscious there's been a lot of talk from down here, assuming roving mics can be found, to open it up and see if anybody in the audience at this stage wants to provide any comment, or more importantly ask any quick, pithy questions. Duncan, first.
Very good. So good morning, everybody. My name is Duncan McKee. I'm one of KPMG's utilities and clean growth specialists, and one of the primary authors of the report that's being launched today. What I plan to do is, you have a summary of the report in your delegate packs, so I wasn't going to spend my time going through each of the findings of the report. What I wanted to do is, my team and I have worked on this. There's a few key thoughts and observations that we had, and I'd just like to leave those with you before we go into the questions. So I think the first aspect, and we heard this very clearly from Piers earlier, is that the challenge is huge and the challenge is significant. From that, there is some good news as well, which is, as you can see from our report, actually the range of technologies and options that you have in the Northern Powerhouse, the things that you can pull on for energy and clean growth going forward, there is a wide range of things to select from. And I think back to 4 or 5 years ago, when a lot of reports were being written about clean growth strategies, and everything was about electrification and removal of carbon from that way. Here we've got far more things, and that's a tribute to the region and its history as well. So good news is around technology. Another piece of good news is actually, so I have the benefit of working across the UK and internationally as well. The fact that the Northern Powerhouse has committed to have this study, to bring things together and look at where the benefits and coordinated action come from, is absolutely critical, and I think that's a really important thing. As Brent said, coordination and meeting the challenge together is a fundamental thing, and it's been really good to be part of that as part of this study. Then we come on to some of the challenges. So if technology is in your favour and the recognition of coordination, then there's some of the key focus areas that we really need to look at. So the first of those is actually securing the commitment to coordination and working together. One of the key things that we've seen both in the energy sector and elsewhere, so as we go through transition, being able to make sure that the supply chain is able to respond. We've seen it with offshore wind and elsewhere. Being able to be clear about what is required from a planning point of view is absolutely critical. And there is clearly a lot to do, and we refer to this as one of our enabling factors in terms of making sure that policy from central government is clear as well. And this is where working together, the one voice from the Northern Powerhouse of, this is our side of the bargain, this is what we can do, policymakers, we need this, this and this to fall into place to be able to drive that change, will be absolutely critical going forwards. So I suppose having put this piece of work together, the points about technology and coordination are key. It's actually where we go with the next steps now in terms of turning this into reality to be able to deliver on really quite challenging targets that the region has set itself is very important.
Thank you, Duncan. So before turning to the questions, I should also share that Emma Hardy MP was unable to join us today, so we did our best not to be all white and male and perhaps in some cases middle and beyond age sat here, because actually this is about all of us. And I'm going to pose some questions and hopefully get some discussion going with the panellists rather than going one by one. And after each question, I'm going to pause and see if anybody from the audience wants to make a comment or otherwise. And if you do so, please would you share with us who you are, because that would be helpful. And I think I'm going to pick up, not in the order I've been given them, but actually I have to pick up your thread, Brent, around how do we actually get our young folk interested and excited in this agenda, the likes of Greta Thunberg and others. How do we engage them? Because at the end of the day, I guess, as much as we might all want to live to a ripe old age, they'll be around to deal with some of this long after we're hopefully a legacy rather than otherwise. So I wonder if you had any thoughts on the question you laid, and maybe invite others to think, and then I'll open it up to see what other people, things we could and will and should do to make sure this is for everybody. So Brent, I know it's a bit of a hospital pass, but forgive me.
It is a hospital pass, and as I say, I've sort of had a segmented career, but a lot of it has been in oil and gas. And every year we used to get together as an industry and say, well, it's terrible, we're not really getting women in, we're not really getting scientists in, we're not really training people. And every year it'd be the same, and we never made any progress. And we set up mini task force and nothing happened. And that was always an issue. And it continues. It's continued. If you go look at Orsted, you look at Dong, we're getting, in my time there, we actually started to fund, as part of our community schemes in the North East and the North West, Teach First. So we're putting STEM teachers into primary schools, so that, and we're sponsoring them, so that we could actually get primary school level kids involved. We helped Siemens get involved with the, is it the Ron Deering Academy here? Yeah. And helped a lot with that, the UTC, and then helped the university with Aura, so that there was a clear line of sight, so that you could, a poor kid, I've been in some of the schools in Grimsby, where the people, I actually sat with a little lad once, and he said, and we'd taken our guy in there who built the wind farms, and he'd come off a sink estate in Liverpool originally, and now he was project manager running a wind farm. We took him into the school, he's talking to them, and this little lad said to me, well, I can never do that. I said, yes, you can. Go outside, have a look at his car, because it's a big black BMW. Look at his car, you can have all of this. He's going, no, I can't. My dad's told me I'll never amount to out. And it's tragic. So we've got to get into the schools. And what we can do in areas like this is give people a clear line of sight through education, through primary school to UTC to university, whatever, as a start. But we also, the key is to get into schools. We can hook the argument, I think, onto climate change and actually say you can make a difference. And the best way you can make a difference is through science, through engineering, or whatever. There are lots of other ways as well, through anthropology, sociology, where you can really help the debate, as Chris mentioned, on how you move people to think in different ways. But you can look at all of this, and I think it's incumbent on us as an industry to actually get out there, and you out there as part of the supply chain, to get out there, get into schools, and actually enthuse people, and also have the examples of people, of where we've got great female engineers, where we've got great people offshore. One of the best engineers and safety people I had in my time at Dong was a Cambridge material scientist, female, super. But you've got to get out there with the examples. And it's a long answer, but I'm also chair of the Durham University Advisory Board for Engineering, and a professor in practice there. And we spend hours, how do we get more female engineers in? It is really difficult, but we're targeting it, we're working very hard. We know lots of other universities are, but we've got to keep doing it. We've got to be absolutely determined, because this is what will move the dial. And if we haven't got the people, even at, not even at, but particularly at apprentice level, getting them in, who's going to dig the roads up to put the EV chargers in? Who's going to come and fit all the insulation in and everything else? Where is all of this? And but the other thing we've got to make people understand is our industry is fun. Look at the scale of it. Look at what we do. Look at the big pipes. Look at the nuts and bolts. It's fantastic. And for me, I've had 42 years as a geologist and engineer, and I've had a ball. And you can go out there and you can do that. But this is something we've really got to keep getting into schools.
You're absolutely right, Brent. It's about also how we tell the story to our young men and women about the opportunities. Thinking about, the NP11 and the North setting about some priority to deliver a net zero pathway, I'd be interested in hear what other members of the panel have to say about how we do engage young people beyond what Brent has said. If anybody wants to add anything. Karl, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so maybe I can just, I would support everything Brent said. Just add to that and say I was an apprentice, so I served my time. I started on the shop floor, so it's possible to go from the bottom of an organisation to the top of an organisation. So never let it be said that it isn't possible. I think for me the other thing is about how do we make our organisations attractive to talent, to diverse talents, and we're not. We try hard, and there's a lot that we need to do on this. But if we spent a lot of time going out into the market, finding really diverse candidates and bringing them into our organisation and then squeezing them into the Siemens mould, because Siemens people look like this, right? And we're proud about that, but it's completely misplaced. And it's diversity of thought that we want as business leaders, and that comes by diversity of characteristics, whether that be gender, race, religion, all of those. But you have to create an environment in your organisation where those differences can be held without and challenged and discussed and debated, but not squashed and uniformed. And I think that's perhaps the only thing I would add to that.
Thank you. Before we open it up, Piers, did you want to add anything in terms of your vantage point of the...
Yeah, just to say, I think something that's been tried around the country, whether these citizen assemblies and the younger person assemblies and things, and I think Brent talked about the kind of pathway, how to identify pathways to school, university, into the workplace. But it's not about just the young generation that need to be retrained, it's some of the older workforce too. And I think by getting it more exciting, as Chris talked about, getting that diversity there and say you don't have to be a one-size-fits-all engineer, you can be all sorts of things. That's great.
Thank you, Piers. I also must share that I, although an accountant by profession, I am a metallurgist by first degree, so I feel as I'm amongst the right company, although I can't remember any of it because it's so long ago. Shall we open it up and see if anybody in the audience wants to make a comment or add a question? There's a gentleman there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is John Falk. I work for TUV UK. We've been talking a lot about wind, we've been talking about carbon capture. We quickly, in passing, mentioned the actual solution to all of this. Back in the 50s, a certain industry started and was hailed as a means of getting energy where electricity would be too cheap to meter. I'm sure some of you will remember that. It's called nuclear. When nuclear started, it was based on water-cooled technology. The reason for it being water-cooled is it was designed for being used in ships and submarines. The new form of nuclear technology is what we refer to as Gen 4, which tends to be lead-cooled, molten salt-cooled, or high-temperature gas-cooled. Now these things produce temperatures at around 600, 700, 800 degrees C. They are actually the solution to our problem. Because when you look at the energy we consume, only 10% of it is electricity. Only 10%. So when wind talks about achieving 30% of our energy needs, they're talking about electricity. 50% of the energy we use is in the form of heat. Directly used in the form of heat. For process and for buildings. 30 to 40% of the energy we use is in transport, ground, sea, air. And these new forms of nuclear power can decarbonize all of that. But to do that takes investment. These are things that take a long time to do, that take a huge amount of money to do. But the only way we're going to achieve it with the government pulling their wallet out of their pocket, choosing a technology. Oh yes, I know that's controversial in the UK, where we all want to give everybody a fair chance.
I think we need to let other people have
I will. I'll wind up to it.
Yeah, please.
We need to choose a technology. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thank you. Karl?
So I would
There's a
say a couple of
lady
things,
over there, yes.
not to dispute exactly all your statistics, but I think the energy usage, electricity is slightly higher than that. And I would say, nuclear is not the answer to transport, and so that's probably electrification, so electricity demand is likely to go up. It's not the only opportunity for transport, of course. And the thing I would say is there's not any single answer. It is not a single answer. It is a mix of technologies that is required. I think, it is true that when you have stability of policy and stability of decision, you can build a supply chain and get successful industries, and wind is exactly that. So I'm not saying that you couldn't do that with nuclear, right? But to think that today it's dead easy, all we need to do is build lots of big nuclear power stations is absolutely not right. And I think it's a mix. And if anything on nuclear, I would argue small modular reactors are more likely the right answer, which is a decentralised form of nuclear. But there is a problem with that, and it's NIMBYism. How many people in the room would be happy having something glowing in the dark in their garden? And that's problematic, but these are the real challenges to form. But I'm afraid it would be nice if there were one answer to this whole problem. There isn't.
Thank you, Karl. And thank you for your question and your comments, and I hope the only thing glowing in the garden tonight will be some fireworks. Certainly will be in my home. The gentleman here, who's waited patiently.
Hello, thank you. Gordon Watts. I'm a professional parent and in my spare time a sustainability manager. And it's relating to how do we engage the next generation in this challenge, if you like, the sector. And what I would say is, you have to think, how do kids communicate these days? Now, I think getting in schools is one of the answers, but they all come surgically attached with a mobile phone, with smart technology. And I'm not sure what the answer is as to how we exploit that to get into their hearts and minds. But I think that we've got to accept they don't communicate the same way that we communicate. So you've got to exploit the technology, and I'm sure there's cleverer people than me that can work out how we do that. But it's just a thought.
It's a good challenge. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on. There's a lady over here who's waited patiently too. So,
good morning. My name's Kirsty Clode. I worked for BP for 27 years. I'm a chemist by background, and you asked the question, how do we get more girls interested into our industries? I run an organisation called Women into Manufacturing and Engineering. The story is collaboration is the key, gentlemen. Siemens and Dong, as was, Ørsted now, are part of a 50-company collaboration in the Humber, where we bring girls together. We took 12 schools and showed 350 girls the fabulous careers here in the Humber. And we started at primary. We had primary school kids there, girls, with their teachers. We educate them all. 50% were interested in our industry when we started the event, and 86% were interested by the time they left an hour and a half later. You don't have to go in individually into schools. If you join with us in the Humber, you have a much louder voice that girls really do understand.
thank you very much. Well done. I should confess, as the proud father of 5 daughters, I very clearly know my place in the world, so don't worry. The gentleman there.
I'm John Henry Looney from Sustainable Direction. I live down in Lincolnshire. I'm the author of the UK's first carbon footprint in 1989, or probably anyway, to misquote a beer ad. But the question I think, we all have to set examples, and so a question I'd like to ask us is, how are we changing our behavior to set examples for the children? And so how many people in this room know their personal carbon footprint and have done anything about it? That's what, 5%?
I know mine's going down because I've got less cars, but anyway.
I think if we could set an example for the young people by the way we change our behavior, what we eat, what we drive, what we do, how we set our temperature, do we recycle? I think this is the key thing. The children watch us. Yeah. And I know that both of my kids have had to put up with this their entire lives. And and both live very environmentally sensible and sustainable lifestyles.
Thank you for your comment. I think it's something we are going to take away and discuss as NP11. What do we need to do, and how do we work with our partners, many of whom are represented here, to make sure not only the opportunities for all young people, but also how we might get them more engaged in what we need to deliver together for not just our but their futures. I'm going to move on with the questions. The gentleman talked about actually we need more government money. Well, I keep reminding people in the Treasury it's our money they're lucky to have the custody of, because it's actually taxpayers' money, and it's quite a challenging time fiscally for this country. Governments have done quite a good job on the P&L account, but the balance sheet's kind of stretched with approaching 2 trillion of national debt, 4 times what it was just over a decade ago. I'd be interested to hear from my colleagues, maybe starting with you, Chris, as to what actually we want from government apart from powers and pounds and to be left alone to get on with it.
Well, I think we want a clear policy is what we're trying to get out of it. The government is doing reasonably well, but I spent a lifetime talking and living with politicians. Politicians' expectations of the future are about 5 days ahead. And an example of it, the highways agent was telling me the other day, when I was asking them what the situation might be about extending the M11 up to the Humber Bridge, which is a 20-year project, so we're not allowed to think more than 5 years ahead. But having a highways transport with a 5-year shelf life is quite difficult, and we've got somehow, and our politicians' expectations get shorter and shorter and shorter. Compare that with our Victorian predecessors when they built a sewage system which lasted 100 years. They built an underground train system which is still there. There were people there who were prepared to think beyond their own generation. We have lost that capacity. Everything is short-term, everything is instant responses, whether it's the NHS or whatever. Get some long-term thinking into it. For that to happen, there has to be consensus. And I said in my talk that one of the encouraging things about climate change is there is quite a lot of consensus amongst the politicians. We've just got to convert that consensus into long-term, and long-term includes investment. We've heard many times about the scale of investment which government has to put into, particularly in something like carbon capture. I don't know. We'll see what happens after this election. I'm very doubtful that there's going to be any clarity about anything after this election, and least of all about long-term thinking. I suspect they'll be thinking about the next general election might be 6 months after that.
That's very helpful from the vantage point of the House of Lords. Thank you. Duncan, do you want to add anything? Because I'm going to, and I'll give you, my fellow panellists, a chance to think about it. I'm going to ask each of you in turn having launched this report today and announced our Net Zero North ambition, what would your top priority be for NP11? So I'll give you a chance to think about that, and I'll come to you last, Duncan. Duncan, do you want to add anything further in terms of what we want from government to be able to deliver this, not only to northern benefit but to national advantage?
So I think the point about the long-term view and commitment and stability is critical, but as we all say, it's kind of unlikely at the moment. I think one of the things that at the moment there's government consultations going on creating a regulated asset base, some form of underwriting, financial underwriting for nuclear power stations, for new nuclear development. And from my perspective, that shows a willingness from government to kind of start to think about these things and engage with these things. But what we've got to see actually is a willingness to respond to some of the thoughts. So thoughts about nuclear regulatory asset values, at the moment, that the design that they've got there doesn't actually have the sort of the long-term stable commitment to a RAB that will be required to take that forward. So there's a need to sort of expand the thinking, and I think then actually there's focus and a bit of acceleration around this. When you hear colleagues in the climate science environment telling us that there's sort of the next 10 years are absolutely critical in determining which of those paths we end up on, +1, +2 degrees versus +7 degrees. the actual sort of focus on this and really move decision making forward. We've seen in other energy policy areas it's taken 5-10 years to put things into place. If we've burnt the whole of our 10 years that the climate scientists are giving us purely on the policy decision making, then I think we've lost the game.
Thank you, Duncan, well put. Right, to that, worth a round of applause. So, coming down the line, starting with you, Piers, what would be your top priority for us in NP11 against our net zero north ambition?
Well, yes, I think it's been almost said by everyone in that, and it's this coordination and collaboration that we have to change behaviours, we have to think about decarbonising our own selves, our own industry, but we have to really have good cross-government. And as the Committee on Climate Change said, the key thing is we need it in every government decision and in every government department. And so that is very much what the Committee on Climate Change would say.
Thank you. Karl?
Yep, so I would agree. I would say coordination. As a commercial organisation, when people bring into my office an opportunity to go and work with a city, I end up in a sweat, because my general view is cities can't organise themselves well enough to actually place a purchase order with anybody, generally, and I'm sure there are exceptions. Hull being one of them, as I'm finding out now.
I hope you're going to say
the Leeds is good apparently too, but I'll just point out I'm from Lancashire, so let's not go too far.
There you go, eh?
So I think it is about... But the other thing I would say, just on the funding, I think that I'm convinced the answer to our problems is a localised answer. And so instead of trying to build a £50 billion one-off solution, which requires a 100-year commitment, what about building lots of smaller things that actually, can be funded in a commercial environment? I talked about spending 100 billion. That wasn't 100 billion of the government or your money. That was 100 billion of commercial money. What it needs is a stable platform into make that investment. Most of the investments that have happened in the offshore wind environment are commercial investments by commercial organisations. It needed pump priming to get it kick-started, and then it needed stability, but not for hundreds of years, for two parliaments. Surely we can aspire to that.
Thanks, Karl. Well done. Chris, very quickly, your top priority.
Very briefly, the local enterprise partnership is about economic growth. I am seriously concerned that with all the best wishes in the world, if we get this right in terms of climate change control, we'll get it wrong with the economy. So the major thing, as far as I'm concerned, particularly in this area, is carbon capture, to make sure that those huge industries, which are so important to us here at the moment, can survive. And that can only be the case if we tackle the issue of carbon sequestration. And we're in a good place to do it, but we need the help.
And it's a shame that government policy meant that probably a decade ago we could be already there, at least. Brent?
Yeah, well, I made the point at the beginning. I think it's all about collaboration. But I think the real issue is, as the MP11, if you now go away and look at it, what is your mechanism going to be to force that collaboration? Because I've seen it so many times. Everybody says they'll collaborate. This is not about committees. This is about how do you have a mechanism that actually does collaborate, and how do you have, to use an old analogy, and it might send some people cold, but do you have something like a CGB of the North that is a virtual thing of a group that says, well, this actually makes sense there, that makes sense there, but just from a prioritisation point, how does it make that real so that and then you can go away and do it? But I think waiting for Westminster, forget it. I heard
we've been waiting for 3 years for Westminster.
I heard a great quote, just very quickly, about 2 months ago, which was 2050 target is close enough to make it, get everybody worried and make it real. It's far enough away that we don't need any detail. That was just from a very senior government person.
Okay, that's...
Get the detail and prioritise.
That's quite sobering, but thank you for that challenge. Duncan, last word to you on this.
I'll be very quick on this one. So from our perspective, having done the work, it's quite clear. So the LEPs at a local level should continue the good work that they're doing. There are points at which working together are absolutely important. My hope is that the 2 days that we've got here in the report act to bring people together.
Glue it
then
together.
Let's get something working and operating that says, well, what's the where the value comes from working together. Let's do those bits together. Let's get some arrangements around it so that the voice of the North can be heard and to kind of continue to push forward.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you. So thank you all on the panel. Please stay there for a moment. Thank you in the audience for being here. I want to also thank my fellow LEP chairs and chief execs who are spread around the room this morning. I hope you've got a clear sense that we in NP11 at a local level but also playing on the national stage are very clear about the North being part of an economic and social solution for decades to come. And I'm very clear about the direction of travel when it comes to energy and clean growth. And forgive me, Christine, because I've used this before at the summit. My late dad would always say to me growing up in the North, he says, Roger, you say, if you don't know where you're going, don't be disappointed by where you end up. I'm very clear where we're going. The North is part of a national economic solution. This approach to energy is how we will achieve that 2050 target, if not exceed it. And so I'm grateful for all of your attention this morning, and thank you for being here for the launch of the report, and hopefully enjoy a coffee break because I'm certainly ready for one. Thank you.